My PhD work is around, I'm using co-design to try to make the care of families who are experiencing the sudden death of a family member more family-centric. There's a tradition in different resuscitation communities to exclude families from resuscitation and not give them an opportunity for things like closeness and proximity to their loved one or even information sharing. So I'm really trying to make it sort of more family-centered. My background, I started off in pre-hospital care as a search and rescue and as a ski patroller and as a lifeguard. And when I needed regular employment that was less exciting, I became an emergency nurse and then a critical care nurse. And I have an academic appointment to the University of Alberta as an adjunct professor of critical care medicine. And my resuscitation science work is around working for the International Liaison Committee on Resuscitation, American Heart Association, Heart and Stroke Canada, writing life support guidelines for things like life-threatening hemorrhage, cardiac arrest, chest compressions, things like that. Thank you.
Thank you so much, everybody. By the way, I just started recording for the folks that are here. Sorry, this will be shared, but I may just go through later on and do a quick introduction again when we go to maybe a little break or something, maybe in the middle if we have. So now actually, I want to start asking you all some questions to kind of get the talk going. Like I said earlier, we want to kind of talk about and hear from you how you prepared, what were the reasons why you prepared for a doctoral degree, and then how you navigated through your programs, and then what it's like afterwards, and how do you transition to life after a PhD. So let's start talking about preparing for a doctoral program, preparing for, for such a credential, wanting to get into this degree. I think my first, I guess, few questions are, if you can tell us what motivated you to actually want to get a PhD for that. That's, I think, the first part. And then what was the most helpful thing for you in preparing for your PhD application and then, the process?
So I sort of made it to second year of my bachelor's and decided I absolutely love research. So I just wanted the opportunity to do more research projects, basically. So I knew then I was going to do a master's, and in the UK, the traditional route now is you do a master's before a PhD. And in the UK, we have a system called University and College Admission System or something like this. And they have a ranking table of all the universities, and they rank them from one to the bottom, the one's the best. So I started at the top, and I was basically trying to find a master's program. And University of Cambridge was at the top, and they offered that particular year sociology of reproduction. Sorry. And before I started sociology, I was training to be a midwife. So I saw this master's and I was like, I have to do that. But I didn't want to go to Cambridge. So I then proceeded to go through the rest of the UCAS list to try and find this same master's program anywhere else. Couldn't find it in the UK. So I was like, I'll go internationally. I'm willing to do that, but I've got to do this program. It didn't exist internationally either. So I was like, all right, I've got to go to Cambridge. And when you're going to Cambridge, you have to submit a research proposal as part of your application, because all the master's degrees have a research element. So I wrote it up, and at that time in the news, genetic editing it just happened in China or something. So I was like, oh yeah, I'm going to do this. It has great scope. Wrote it so passionately, sent it to my potential supervisor, and she went, Amrit, that's not your master's, that's your PhD. Okay. And at that point, I hadn't really set my heart on whether I was going to do a PhD at that point. I just knew I was going to do a master's. I was like, well, if I can't do it for my master's, then I'm clearly doing a PhD as well. So that's how that came about. And so I knew then that I'd be doing my PhD at the same university. And they have a massive sociology reproduction research group there. Yeah, so that's how I got to my PhD. And yeah, I just sort of had this obsession with the topic, and it was so great to meet so many people. Was that all the questions?
If you follow up, but that's great. From all your perspectives, what was your motivation to go into it? Yeah, and then how did you prepare?
Yeah. So yeah, for me, my intention was more to move into sort of general management in the NHS. So I actually, there wasn't a sort of, I wasn't sat there thinking I need to do a PhD from sort of a really early point. But yeah, so I think I undertook a master's with the Health Management Centre with that purpose. Actually, it was an MSc in Leadership for Health Services Improvement. Really, and at the start of that master's, as I say, the intention was to kind of move in the master's that helped me move into business management and get my first sort of business management position. And I was managing staff in the NHS, and it was all going wonderfully. But the further along in the MSc I got, the more some of the lecturers and the people many people Mark knows, was sort of saying, well, actually, you've got quite an aptitude for this academic work. And by the end of it, it was when I was doing my dissertation with Mervyn Conroy, was my supervisor for my dissertation, and who later became my PhD supervisor. I think the other piece that was really important for me was identifying something that I was passionate about. And I think that's probably what's kept me going. I'm a PhD student. My dissertation in my master's was looking at the concept of distributed leadership in relation to clerical workers or administrative staff. And there was such a dearth of research in that area, and having sort of worked in those kind of roles and worked with people doing those roles, I think I quickly sort of developed a bit of a mission. Do some research that really was exploring those people's experiences. You know, in Scotland alone, the second largest workforce in the NHS, nursing, but it is very poorly sort of supported in terms of training and all these types of things. It's often referred to in terms of what it's not. So it's non-clinical. You know, and, you know, often as well talked about in terms of, you know, what we need to plus to this bureaucratic, side of the NHS business. So, yeah, so for me, there was a sort of a little fire in sort of helped as well. So, yeah, don't know who wants to go this way and then we'll hear from.
Let's see. So I actually first got introduced to research just in general. That was kind of my first kind of introduction to nursing, actually. So in nursing school, typically it's, you know, you're doing your didactic training, then you might work in a hospital, you know, as like a nursing assistant. My first job actually was as a research assistant. And so I went to Virginia Commonwealth University in Richmond, Virginia. A lot of research scientists, it was like drilled into us as part of our training. And so I actually worked on an NIH funded study looking at ventilator associated pneumonia. This is back in like 2005, 2006. Interestingly enough, so for that study, we're using chlorhexidine, right, to prevent this. I then go into nursing, bedside critical care, loved research, but I was like, I need to learn how to actually like do this thing of being a nurse. And what we were then using, maybe 2009, healthcare, you know, quality was really ramping up then. Every 4 hours, chlorhexidine for our ventilated patients. So I could kind of see the full circle moment and also the impact of being involved in research. And that actually piqued my interest even more to say, oh, wow, this thing that I was studying is now being applied in the real world implications really of research. So I continued on in nursing. And actually when I went back for my master's in public health, part of that reasoning was around just kind of seeing a lot of frequent flyers in the unit and making this disconnect rather, to like just poor quality that we had in terms of helping patients navigate our system, supports that they and resources that they didn't have outside once they left the hospital, and also really the gap in primary care, right? So clearly that was one of the missing pieces, and maybe the weak points of our system, just not a robust enough primary care system. And so it actually got me interested in primary care. Then discovered patient-centered medical home model, value-based payment, pay for performance. So I was literally self-study going down this rabbit hole and said, oh, okay, let me go upstream so I can make more of an impact. Let me go back for my master's in public health. First semester, I'm taking biostats, epi, and I was like, oh, wow. Remember back then when I used to do research, this is kind of, nice. Met with a professor who was doing work on quality ratings, and just kind of had a chat, talking. And she's like, Portia, have you ever thought about going into research? So kind of similar to you, Jenny, in terms of sometimes you need somebody from the outside to kind of observe your passion. Didn't think about it. I just was like, okay, I'll just go into public health, work in public health. I said, you know what? That's a good idea. Thought on it some more. And I said, yeah, if I want to be able to kind of make an impact, have some flexibility with my career, I'm, again, still very much interested in value-based models, primary care, partnerships. I said, I can combine the two, right, in terms of my knowledge of healthcare and public health. And so that really is what motivated me to kind of go down the PhD route. In terms of preparation, I think just kind of being a sponge really helped me. So when I did my master's, it was part-time. I was still working bedside. And I was like, Portia, there's no need to rush. Take your 3 years and just learn public health, right? I was used to a health system. So I had to literally, I worked at the public health department, worked at CDC, kind of leverage what I tell my students, my student card, to really like have just cold calls with people and reach out. And so that was part of, I think, my preparation for the PhD, just meeting people, talking to people, meeting other PhDs, asking them like, hey, how did you navigate this? What kind of things do you need to prepare? Learning about different programs and opportunities. That really kind of helped me in terms of like doing my homework and also just kind of taking my time and not feeling rushed to kind of, prepare to kind of enter this next phase.
Oh, okay, sorry. I was gonna say, we'll hear from Tony and Matt now, but that kind of leads to my next set of questions, if you could incorporate it in your response as well as this network, right? Was that part of your preparation for getting into a doctoral program? Did you do networking or did you not? But again, Tony and Matt, both of you, what was the reason? What piqued your interest? Tony, I know you. I know you, but tell everybody else.
Well, really, my story is, in essence, it's very simple. Part of my work and working for the Army Surgeon General at the policy level, strategic planning, so forth. And I also was the Army representative to the National Disaster Medical System. I was on the board of that organization, which no longer exists. It was disestablished, merged into other emergency preparedness at HHS Rockville. And so policy experience. And, I really was smitten with it, I guess. But before that, let me back up. Number one, I'm a lifelong learner. I have never been comfortable not being enrolled in a night class, even though I had a very busy career in hospital management. And I went all the way through a doctorate, ABD, in political science, public administration, international relations, American national government, and skipped many years. I did that with great passion, but I got a job offer and I moved across the country. And I said, no problem. I'll finish it, I'll finish it. No, rarely works like that because life happens. You have family, very busy jobs. And so it didn't happen. So I wound up with 2 master's degrees. I have an MA in international relations, and I have an MPH. I always was a fan of the NHS. And my idea in going across the pond was because I was going to dig into the NHS and hopefully learn enough to be able to, in some way, maybe small way, contribute to supporting and defending the NHS in England, UK, larger scope. But as I said earlier, then I found out that then the US started merging into my research and my studies there. And so it's a part of the research I've been doing. But anyway, that's why I originally did that. And it's been great. And it's been worth all the hours and all the time. I will add one other thing. I've continued to overcome some obstacles here. I actually started out at a different university in England. And this is one of those stories that happens to people. Everything was going well. And, you know, great supervisors, everything was going. First supervisor retired. Okay. Second supervisor, good guy, can work with him. Okay. So he steps up and becomes my supervisor. I only had one. He retires. And I'm already past proposal. I'm already past in England, it's called progression. When they do like you to come in with a proposal, as was mentioned earlier. And I did. I mean, not fully developed, but you know, something. And so you reach the point where after completing all the 4 modules that they require you to take, then you really fully elaborate your proposal, and then you have to defend it before a panel of professors. And so I'd already done all of that. And then I had these 2 retirements. And the second guy, when he retired, he said, "There's nobody here that can supervise your thesis. There's just nobody here that can do it because they just don't, they're just not into what you're doing." So then I started looking around, and networking really paid off because the first supervisor that retired knew Mark Exworthy really well. And
HREx, we're sitting right over here. Turn around,
that's right.
Mark, and say hello to the camera.
That is a true statement. That is a true statement. I can assure you.
I cannot retire. I'm too young to retire, by the way.
So that's my exalted supervisor. And so that's how I went from the other university. I guess it should remain nameless, I guess. And that's how I transferred to Birmingham. And, you know, it's one of those things where I always say, when bad things happen, you can almost always find something in there that's good. And that's the way this worked out.
Great, thanks. What about you?
Yeah, I need to mention for my scientific inquiry getting kicked off. I'm an elder millennial, 40-year-old child of the early 1980s. So I grew up during the era of blind taste testing for colas. And I think that was really sort of the impetus for my wanting to measure and understand the differences between like things and measuring them. I know his memories would be like dad bringing home a number of different root beers or a number of different colas. I'd be like, oh, I bet you I can tell which one's Pepsi. Yeah, that's where it started. Prior to entering the PhD, I had my own program of research around dismounted complex blast injury. So always very applied. Leading cause of potentially survivable death on the battlefield. No really great techniques for managing it. It's a catastrophic injury. And I'd taken care of patients with similar injury patterns in the emergency department. So I grew a program of research But without a PhD in my system, it's hard to hold grants and it's hard to be my own PI and be in a leadership position. So it made sense. I also overestimated my abilities in my master's degree, I think, to run projects independently. So the PhD has been properly, humbling and like appropriate, I think, for my academic development. And I had always thought that I'd be a clinician first and a researcher second. And then I had a life-threatening illness and I pivoted away from late nights and shift work, I think as many people do as I got older. So I decided that I would take this passion to answer questions and to do health system improvements. And I would put my energy there because I may not be able to provide clinical care for as long as I thought that I would. For me, the most important thing was finding the right program supervisors. I traveled the world. I interviewed many, was interviewed and did interview in many different programs. And what I finally settled on was finding people, great people, Kate and Teal, thank you, who will say, when I propose different things, they say yes and. They don't say no. They don't say no but. It's really like, yes, you can do these things. A place where innovation and maybe risk-taking can be fostered. And there was a willingness to partner in my own sort of harebrained ideas, less than some other programs where it was more like, I have a great data set that would be awesome for you to analyze for your PhD, right? Or I have a program of research that is really special and you want to be a part of it. I was able to find a place where my own ideas and passions could be fostered and I could grow a career out of it. I think especially coming as in my late 30s as a clinician, I might have been stubborn and maybe less teachable than other people, I don't know. We were able to partner, I think, to do really important work. And the networking aspect for me was that I was coming from a system where I was well networked. I had a community of practice and community of scientific inquiry, but what I didn't have was the academic. I wasn't able to find anyone who could take me on as a PhD student and teach me to be a scientist. So that's what my network was lacking, which is why I went to University College Dublin and found my current supervisors.
Wonderful. And it's important. Yeah, and it's important to note that Matt is also a remote student. He's in Canada and he is completing his doctorate with University College Dublin. And both of you, Kate Fraser, Tila Kroll, turn around and say hello to the camera, to the people watching, because these are Matt's supervisors, PhD supervisors. Yes, Tony.
Sorry, just one comment I need to
Absolutely.
make. I know you're wondering, I'm early fourth career.
Okay, so I actually have a question that I think a lot of the audience would be interested in. Program maybe in another country, maybe here. Logistics of the program and the structure. It's different in the US and the UK and Ireland and every other country. You all kind of talked about a little bit, Tony, about, coming in with a PhD, not with a PhD, coming in with a research idea. Explain to us, again, I know I'm in the US, but again, we'll to the audience, what is the structure of a doctoral program where you're in? Meaning, do you come and you just take coursework, you go straight into a PhD, you go into your doctorate project, your dissertation, or how does it work? The logistics of it.
Well, kudos to Tony and Matt for thinking outside the box and beyond the pond. I wasn't even, when I was looking at PhD programs, the thought never even crossed my mind to be like, oh, let me go to the UK. I have family there, but never thought about, studying there necessarily, or even the possibility of doing it remotely. But I will say, of course, in the US, depending on your area of study, doctoral programs can look very different. But here at University of Maryland, for the program that I went through, in terms of the structure, it's, first years of, foundational coursework in health economics, econometrics, health policy, health equity. And then it's really kind of, in terms of your electives, kind of make that what you want. By the end of your second year, you're taking your qualifying exams. And really then, if you have not yet thought about your potential proposal topic, you should be thinking about it. Then you prepare for your third year, hopefully defend it spring of your third year, that proposal, and then work on your dissertation and finish. I think one thing that is different, I do have observed a difference between folks that come into the program kind of already knowing their research. So I came in already knowing what my research topic was going to be about. So for my dissertation, I looked at the impact of social deprivation index on utilization of the National Diabetes Prevention Program. So that was very much focused on, work that I had done prior, being a chronic disease program manager at the state of Georgia, their public health department. So I think that is helpful. I know some programs here stateside don't necessarily require you to have that topic ready yet, like how some of you have mentioned, but I think it is helpful for you in your matriculation, because then as you're taking these courseworks, you can kind of be, brainstorming and thinking about, okay, how does my topic fit in? Do I need to shift it? Is it going to change? Because it will morph to some degree by the time you actually defend it. So yeah, that's pretty much what our structure is stateside.
Yeah. So from a UK perspective, a full-time PhD would be 3 years, and you might have an extra year to write up. And a part-time degree, PhD would be 6 years. There's 2 ways you can sort of go into a PhD in the UK. So you can go in with a idea already, which was my route, or you can sort of advertise that, X people have started a project, and then you can sort of join someone else's project, and the sort of the research topic's already there for you, and there's some scope to make it your own. So then you go in whichever route and you start your program. And your first year, I'm going to go down the full-time route here. So the first year, you sort of develop research skills and try and hone in on what research methods you'd need to do your project. A lot of it's literature review, and you sort of hone in your exact topic and your research questions, etc. Then you submit a proposal at the end of that, and that's sort of confirmed. And after that,
After the
it's a
first year,
yeah,
in the first year,
in the first
you
year,
submit your
because
proposal.
PhDs are only 3 years.
Okay.
So you submit that proposal towards the end of your first year, and if that's approved, then you're sort of a fully fledged PhD student. Second year, you spend doing this is how it's supposed to go. Second year, you're supposed to spend doing your research and all your field work, etc. And then third year, sort of write up. But between the second and third year, you would be expected to sort of produce some form of a chapter to submit to your supervisor to go forward. Obviously, with the part-time, it's just doubling the length of each of those. Yeah, and that's sort of the general structure of how it works, which is very different to the US because they're far longer. First years in your PhD, you can't teach at all generally. And then maybe second year onwards, you might be able to have teaching opportunities, but they're not mandatory. They are very optional. And some people don't get any at all.
Okay. Okay. And between, Jenny and then I'll ask about Ireland, because I don't know if it's the same structure, if it's different, but between Jenny and Tony and the three of you. So I'm interested about the coursework and the didactic. You mentioned that. So is it that when you first start in that first year, the coursework you're completing is related to methodology and the content of your interest, or there are core requirements you need to complete?
I'm not suggesting there's one size fits all, but nearly.
American or the American style of a doctorate, and you've also gone through a British style of a doctorate. So I'm curious, from your perspective, what do you think were benefits, good and bad, about approaches?
I have a distinct. So, right. And actually in Scotland as well. Most programs, your question, have typically 5 research, I agree with Amberpreet, first year research training courses, or we call them modules. And there's a reason why they're called modules, because they're short. They're very short. I mean, I've had modules that were 1 week and some are 2 weeks. And as I say, there's no one size fits all, but in my case, I think my 5 research training modules that had to be completed successfully were, I think each was 1 week, maybe was a week and a half. And the key word that is distinctive for the programs in England, self-directed. Doctoral programs in England are much more self-directed. You don't punch tickets for 60 or 72 hours of coursework, and then you do your proposal, and then you can start on the dissertation, as you call it here. Dissertation in England is master's level. Thesis is doctoral level. So the terminology is just reversed. But did that get at your? It's self-directed is the key, and you get an excellent introduction to the literature of whether it's qualitative research or quantitative research or whatever the module happens to be. You get a great introduction to the literature, and then it's up to you. You need to read that because it's gonna come up. They're gonna find out that you don't know. So it's very self-initiative is crucially important there.
Yeah, no, I was just gonna add, I mean, I've actually found the process to be very flexible and supportive. So my master's was not, it didn't include research methods. My master's was in leadership. So that was really preparing me to leadership research methods master's. So when I started my PhD, in those first 2 years, I did something which I believe the university still run, called the Postgraduate Certificate in Advanced Research Methods and Skills. So that consisted of doing sort of 4 core research modules, so sort of qualitative methods, quantitative methods, and then some other shorter modules, one which was actually a placement with the university for a week, shadowing one of the professors there, so learning a bit about how the faculty worked, and yeah, so that was fantastic. And that actually gave me a qualification quite early on, which felt like a nice milestone as well. It was, oh, I've got something. I mean, especially when you're part-time, and the final kind of outcome looks really far away. It was really nice to get something quite early on. In terms of research question, I mean, I don't know how standard this is, but I've only just recently pinned down finally my required me to rethink, well, actually, what's the most appropriate research question? So I think my sort of substantive topic has moved. There's been flexibility and kind of taken that forward. So it's not been rigid. It's been a really good experience. Yeah.
Yeah, studying UCD much more like the UK. When I was shopping for doctoral programs, I created an Excel spreadsheet with American, Canadian universities, some Australian, some European, looking at where I could go, and studying in modules that were directly focused on what my needs were to complete my project, or what my needs were based on my own learning needs, weaknesses in my prior preparation, felt really applied and practical and met my needs more than a mandatory course requirement that seemed kind of arbitrary. It might be the core knowledge for me in nursing of my profession, but it didn't allow me to do the work that I wanted to do, which was ultimately, doing, saving lives or reducing morbidity mortality from sudden death. I'm committed to that. And many of the course requirements for American and Canadian universities, it was hard for me to see how paying that tuition and studying those courses would allow me to make the impact that I wanted to make.
Well, I mean, this is a really good overview, because I think it's important for everybody to understand there are differences, but there are similarities and differences, and how each system works, because it could be to the benefit of a student if they prefer a certain style over another. So I think it's really nice to hear about that, especially from our perspective, sitting here in the room of how it works across the pond. So now I want to transition to navigating and life during your doctorate, to preparation for after. So there are several questions here, but I think we've kind of touched base on some of them already. I think the one thing I want to hear, and we talk about this all the time, we went through COVID. In my opinion, we're still in COVID. There's still, COVID cases. But, during this time, it really hurt a lot of students and it really impacted how students navigated through their programs and how they went through their programs. So I'm wondering, in the height of the pandemic, let's say, how was your research and profession impacted or changed? Was it? And how was it changed? And perhaps how did you overcome that? Well, what were the strategies you used to kind of work with that?
I don't mind going first. I was actually employed during the pandemic from my substantive post in the NHS. So the first conversation I had with my supervisor was really around, you know, obviously there was a lot going on. I was having to very quickly learn the ropes in a different post. It was very stressful. So I actually took a leave of absence. And, you know, there was some anxiety about that. You know, for me, it was sort of, oh gosh, you know, am I going to get so far out of it? It's going to be difficult to get back into it. But no, that was totally the right decision. And I think if, you know, obviously it's extended my anticipated end date, but I think, you know, that's fine. I think you have to look after your health and well-being first. You have to think about your family first and what's manageable for you. So yeah, I think that was all what I was going to say on that. Was the part of the question there, Nick? Yep.
It falls into another question about in general well-being,
Yeah.
life balance, whether it's
Yeah.
pandemic or not.
Yeah,
You know,
yeah.
we can talk about that as well. How did you adjust throughout the pandemic, but in general, you know,
general,
we
yeah.
all, most of us here, either you're in a doctor, you're getting ready, or we've completed it
Yeah.
and we're in our career. It's very challenging to go through that stage of life. So maybe also talk about as part of your
Just in
responses,
general.
Just in
Yeah.
general.
No, I mean, it's, I think doing it part-time. I mean, I'm working full-time. So it's a full-time job in the NHS, obviously super busy. And it's how do you build in the time for the PhD? Actually, in my household, we have a rule that neither me nor my husband will work on a Saturday. Saturday is our day. It's the day off. And we try and hold to that as much as possible. So I will study on a Sunday. I will study some evenings in the week, but a Saturday, it's nope. We are going to put on our hiking boots. We live in Scotland. We're going to get outside. We're going, whether it's raining, it's often raining, and go out and just get some fresh air. And that just works wonders because you get home, you feel different, you feel better, and then you feel better equipped to go. If you can't work 7 days a week, that is, it's actually dangerous, I think, particularly for a sustained period, whether that's years of a PhD or whether that's a part-time, longer-term PhD. So
I will tell you personally, I went through a few mental breakdowns when I was wrapping my doctorate because I worked full time. I actually worked, 2 to 3 jobs at the same time while going to school, and it's very challenging. So having those mechanisms, and Portia and I here have talked about it many times, having the mechanisms to deal with that is very important. Portia, what about you?
Well, I'm just arriving at the no work on weekends on the other side of this. So, I mean, when the pandemic first hit, I was TAing for a course, and I also was in the middle of creating my own course. And so it was a very quick shift to online learning, and then having to like redesign the course that I was teaching for online, to be taught online, right? And some of it actually required interaction with other students who have, it was kind of a heavy lift with that. In terms of the actual research, at that point, I was preparing to, oh no, comps. I'm trying to think back, 2020. Okay, it's been a while. So yeah, that was the summer that I took our qualifying exams. So that went pretty okay. And then I was also prepping for to start my new course, and then I was studying data for my dissertation. So I had to pivot a bit in terms of the data source that I used, and kind of probably took longer than maybe would have because I was using data from the Maryland Healthcare Committee. So I think they're also going through, that's their priority. So it does shift some things. I guess in terms of self-care, it was a very trying time. I was working like 6 days a week. But I think maybe towards the, like, it can be very kind of insular experience being a PhD student, even if you know, it doesn't matter. Like you feel like you're in your own cocoon. And so I actually try to be really intentional about like connecting with friends, seeing friends. So I think that really how I tried to kind of that storm. But I will say I did not have the best habits, full transparency. But that's something I'm learning to, like set the boundary.
The world is not falling apart in that one night.
That's for time, keeping my weekends open. I do not work on weekends now at all. That's been really helpful, kind of transitioning out of the PhD program.
Yeah, for me, even before the pandemic, I took a leave from a program. So I'm a part-time student, but I also took leaves. I took a mental health leave early on. I needed to get myself well. So I think I took 6 months even before the pandemic. I paused my studies to work clinically at the bedside during the pandemic to fulfill, I think, or my professional duties and obligations at the time. My partner, Catherine, and I, we had 2 kids. We have 3 kids. We have 2 during the PhD program, and she's a fellowship trained physician. She has her own career. So we kind of split our household in a way that she had her own professional obligations, and I took care of much of taking care of the kids at home while we were doing this. For me, my experience of doctoral studies have maybe been a bit different. For me, it's been my studies have actually been more health promotive and more health protective. It's been a place where I have what I feel like is the unconditional support of my supervisors to be well first. I entered the program really thinking that I was going to do really great, amazing work. And that was the most important thing. I'm on this mission. I'm so driven. And then that seriously wasn't sustainable. So surrounding myself with the right people to put my humanity first has actually been super health protective.
Well, first of all, I was lucky that I had completed all my field research in England prior to the pandemic. And if I had not done that, I think because of the participants that I was recruiting, I think it'd be very difficult to even do that now. I have to get in a little bit to what the sample was, which was, they were all elites. Mark and I have talked about this, how it might be difficult to even get anything beyond a Zoom meeting. And if you look at elite interviewing literature, it's the experts recommend that you try to stay away from that and stay away from telephone interviews for a whole variety of reasons, including reading their eyes and reading their body language and just connecting better with especially people who are elites. And what am I talking about? In my case, my sample of participants included peers, which is another term for members of the House of Lords in England, former chief executives of the NHS, medical directors, very prominent academics, political advisors, and think tank officials. So these were the elites that I had to recruit to I think answer the questions that I needed to answer for my thesis. And I think I was just lucky that I got past I had done all that before the pandemic hit. But the downside for me, and I think we've talked about this, it was mental. During that period, even though I wasn't impaired from doing field research, I really had a really difficult time. I had a lot of different things coming at me from family and other sources, and just the general situation, the way the pandemic was affecting the economy. You know, I had two sons that lost their jobs, you know, and then I had some caring responsibilities for their kids, you know, when they were looking for jobs and so forth and so on. And so, you know, I was affected. I mean, I was definitely affected, and it took me a while to realize how affected I was mentally, i.e. depressed. And I was, and it really did impair me. And that's the way I was affected from the pandemic.
So I'm going to start with the work-life balance, similar to what other people on this panel today. For the first 2 years, admittedly, I probably didn't have a very good work-life balance at all. In that I was in Cambridge, most of all my family are from Manchester, and this will mean nothing to you guys, but it's a 3.5-hour journey minimum back to Manchester from Cambridge, and it's a very expensive one as well. So it's not one you take very often. So even though Cambridge promotes a lot of socializing, etc., just because of the culture and the people that are there, even if you're having dinners or you're going out on the weekend for a walk or, you know, doing something else, you usually end up talking about research. And it sort of ends up as an extended networking session in many ways. So even though you think you're socializing, you're not. You're still basically working. And sometimes it's good, you know, you're still networking, or you're doing other activities, but you're basically developing transferable skills that you could use in whatever profession you choose to go into. So you never really switched off for my first 2 years anyway there. And then just before the pandemic, I was working at Parliament. I was doing a fellowship there, and a part of that I was doing my research, and my research was done in 3 stages. So I did an online survey, then I did interviews similar to what a colleague over there was doing, where I had to speak to peers, so members of the House of Lords, to prominent people in the government officials, etc. And I used a range of interview methods there. So I spoke to them via video call, just via traditional phone call, face-to-face, etc. And then the last phase of my research was focus groups. And my focus groups were for people who had genetic conditions. So by their very nature, they had to be flexible. So I ended up to basically what was supposed to be in-person focus groups that ended up online. So I developed a lot of digital research skills basically just before the pandemic. So as the pandemic hit, I was starting to write up my dissertation, as you called it here, but my thesis. But a lot of my peers, they were like, oh shoot, I can't do my research. So it was great because they then could draw my expertise, and I was helping people transition their research from face-to-face to all these range of digital ones without it seeming so scary, and letting them see the benefits, so a lot of them could continue. There was some downsides in that we didn't have access to the full range of library resources, etc. But then increasingly so the librarians were making it accessible so we could continue in different ways. So as COVID hit, like I said, I was writing up, so it was basically very quiet. Had I been in Cambridge, I probably would have been writing groups, and I would have seen my supervisor, and she would have been checking in on me and say, you know, have you done something, even though it's very self-directed, she would have, you know, just said informally, you know, how's it coming along? So there was none of that, because you ain't going to hit up a Zoom call just to say, oh, I'm going. So I wrote the first draft pretty fast because it was me, myself, and my 4 walls for the best part of 6 months. So yeah, I had no distraction at all except for my Thursday clapping that I could go and join. So yeah, and we was allowed to go outside to walk for half an hour. So bar those 2 things, I literally had nothing else to do other than write up my thesis. So it was good in that respect. But like I said, it was very quiet. Yeah. So
Okay.
that was my experience.
No, I mean, there's a theme here, right? You have to learn how to take care of yourself. You have to have boundaries. You have to make sure that you're identifying and actually realizing that you have mental health challenges that you can take care of it. It's all about well-being. I mean, this is very important going through a doctoral program. And in general, I don't care if it's a master's program, doctoral, undergraduate, this when you're going through academia and an education at the higher level. So it's very, it actually leads me to a follow-up question that I was going to ask about transferable skills, right? During as well as post. And I'm saying during because a majority of students, and I mean, you all up here, you're already working as well as you're as at the same time that you're getting your doctorate. So while you're in a doctoral program, you're getting skills that you can apply to your profession, as well as maybe if there are students who are not working and then they can apply it afterwards. So what are those skills that you think are transferable that you all feel for you are the skills that are really transferable into a professional setting?
I'll start since I've got the microphone. So I think one thing that you learn quite early on is synthesizing literature. So I think it doesn't really matter what profession you go into, there'll be an element where you have to read loads or, you know, something. And that's one skill you learn in a PhD quite early on, is to read a lot of literature and synthesize it. Especially for me, I had to forever write informal pieces to my supervisor. So that was a really good one. Writing for different audiences as well. So because of the nature of my topic, I have to often find myself translating a lot. So between, you know, what happens scientifically or clinically and just taking the jargon out of it and making a person who is not from my industry at all understand that. And that's a skill. And you learn to write for different audiences, and that's also a different skill. Yes, you can write a full-blown journal article for a more academic audience. You can write one for like members of parliament, etc. And that's a whole different audience. So you learn to write for different audiences, and that's also a skill. Networking, that's a skill. I don't think people appreciate just how much of a skill networking is. And I know a lot in the UK, they talk about this 2-minute elevator exercise.
2-minute elevator.
The elevator pitch or something. And perfecting that, like, that's also a skill. So all those sort of skills as well. Saying no, that's also a skill. Saying no is a massive skill. And that's also underappreciated, I think. But again, it comes into this work-life balance and protecting your health and stuff. And at some point, you have to recognize you only have so much capacity. There's only so many hours in a day. And to be able to perform to the standards that you'd like to excel in one area, ultimately, you have to say no to something. Otherwise, across the board, things start to suffer. So yeah, they're all the skills that I'd say. I'll let everyone else touch on skills because I know there's going to be loads. Yeah.
I thought that was spot on. And I'm actually the first thing that you said, the kind of synthesizing lots of literature. I really just had that experience at work a few days ago. CMS just comes out with something. Hey, Federal Affairs needs you to look at this and give us some talking points for leadership. Like, literally just happened to me. But I would add to that to say also there, and I use this in my PhD program. But of doing your dissertation, really trying to learn how to effectively communicate with your advisor. Also kind of just like observing and learning personalities. So you kind of know like who's put on the committee, who's gonna gel, how to kind of organize, because really, it's your dissertation, you're really the PI. And so you need to quickly learn how to manage the project and make your needs known, right? We don't need once a month, we really need to be meeting maybe every week, or, I need your help with this, X, Y, and Z. So I think that's kind of a skill that's been helpful and helped me as I transition into kind of a workspace, still kind of doing that.
On this end, anything you two gentlemen can highlight?
Speed reading. It helps a lot. And of course, being able to get your arms around an article quickly and synthesize it, summarize it. But the two that come to mind for me are time management, and separate from that, I've had a course, a full, like a year course in project management in another life, and I think it's a project, and I'm not suggesting that you need to use Microsoft Project to document your project for a thesis, but wouldn't hurt. But I do think project management skills come into play so that you can make the best use of your time, and also the sequence of the tasks that you need to do.
Okay, Matt,
It's very similar. I think the only thing I could add, based on the nature of my project, is that now I have one finite project that I can report on, and I can tell the story of it, where maybe you hired a research coordinator, or you recruited this many people, you secured this amount of funding. So for future employer future projects, or to demonstrate the ability of myself project. So before I had a disjointed body, but now I can say that there's
I was saying also like teaching yourself how to be comfortable, rather learning something that is completely unknown. Like you don't have an advisor to say, oh, this person knows this. They can. So for my patient, use the cloud platform, specifically the distance API. So essentially, I use that to try to calculate travel time and distance estimates. My advisor didn't know anything about it. So they couldn't help me. So I'm literally just like self-directed, just teaching myself how to do this thing, going on YouTube. And so I think there is a level of comfort that you have to have with just not knowing how to do something and just diving in and being okay with teaching yourself and also executing it, right? Not like being hesitant about actually like following through with that and saying, yep, I can stand on this. I taught myself from beginning to end, and I'm confident that this is how this thing works.
I was going to say, that's actually, I was thinking about that. That's very important. There's a level of hand holding that's understandable when you go into any program. Naturally, understanding the processes and logistics and things like that. But we need to be self-directed. We're in a level when you start hitting masters and doctorate, I would even argue undergraduate. You need to learn these things even as an undergraduate program, because you're not going to have that every second year levels. It's very important. One thing I did want to say is I have a few of my own students in here. So now when I keep telling you all, I ask you all to write, think, summarize all these writing assignments, it's for a reason. So don't hate me. Every semester I'm like, they all hate me. But it's all about critical thinking and review and synthesis. And that's why I have you all do those large writing assignments. Now you know. Okay. All right. Yeah.
Just one.
Yeah, absolutely.
Just one comment. I was just going to follow on what Portia was saying. I think obviously, as I've said a few times now, I work in the NHS, and I was redeployed from my business management role into a research role because they needed somebody with the right skills to undertake a piece of research around mental health and well-being in dentistry. So all of a sudden, you go from being, your identity is as a student, as a PhD student, to suddenly being the person that people are looking to in a professional environment for the answers. So I think there's something about just trying to hold on to a sense of confidence that in that room, you are the expert. You may not feel inside entirely.
Syndrome there. That is
loads of imposter syndrome. Absolutely. But I also think it's okay to say, do you know what? I'm not totally sure about the answer to that, but I'll go away and I'll find out and I'll come back to you. Just try to like wing it and make it up. So I think that's actually, just trying to develop that sense of kind of self-worth and confidence. Actually, you know more than you think you know, and you probably know more than other people in the do and in a non-academic setting.
Absolutely, absolutely. That's actually a great transition. One more question, but then I'm going to open it up to the audience and the supervisors that are sitting here in case we want to talk about some, ask you questions from them. But I think let's transition to post graduation. Okay, a few of you. I mean, Portia is already pretty much there. We have Amarpreet who's in that stage, but we have folks that are, although you have professional careers, you're still in that student role and you're going to be looking for other things and hopefully moving forward and up in your careers. So I want to know maybe from you all, what's been the process of maybe applying for jobs, postdocs? Are you doing that? How are you preparing for that? Basically, in other words, for your next transition, whatever that's going to be, what has been the process for you?
I'll start then.
Yeah.
So probably whilst I was writing up during COVID, my projection then it was a year to go, basically. That's when I started looking for applying for jobs. And initially I thought I wanted to work in policy. But what I was increasingly finding was that they were always fixed term or sort of contracts. And what I really wanted was a permanent job. So I had to look at my skill set and sort of had to appreciate the economy as well, especially because we just hit COVID and there was so much uncertainty. So it was almost going to be, you're going to have to take what you get type thing as well. So I was searching, I was using, in the UK, there's a website called jobs.ac.uk. So it looks at academic positions, and I was a part of several mailing lists that were gonna, help me find opportunities that I might have been interested in. Long story short, I applied for 12 jobs with University of Birmingham being my 12th. I was shortlisted for 6 of them. So I was interviewed for 6 of them. But my interview at Birmingham was my 5th interview. I didn't take the 6th because I got the job. But yeah, but I was looking for ages, and that the applications are in academia or in most jobs now, and in the policy world as well, they're absolutely huge. Even if they're for a year contract, 2-year contract, postdocs applications, etc., they are lengthy applications. But the more you do, the quicker you get. And some of them you can sort of edit and repurpose what you've written for some. And you get quicker the more you do them. And even though I'd done 4 interviews before I'd done my University of Birmingham one, I didn't find it as a waste of time or be disheartened by it. I was like, that wasn't for me. Some of them really weren't for me when I went to interview. And that's what the interview process is about, really, is finding, a fit as well. But taking them as sort of learning opportunities, saying, well, I learned from that. This is what I learned from that. How can I apply it to my next one? So by the time I gave my presentation for the University of Birmingham, where I had to present to the whole school, it was via Zoom. I had to do a 10-minute presentation. That was timed to perfection. To the point the chair was like, wow, you fit right in 10 minutes. I was like, I know. I knew it was gonna, so I had no qualms there. Yeah, so practicing, and all those the other 4 interviews leading up to that, they helped me practice, they helped me hold my answers, etc. So by the time I was doing this 5th interview for Birmingham, I knew sort of what the buzzwords were, what they were going to be looking for, what I had to say, what I need to address, how I needed to make myself shine. Basically, I must have done something right because I'm now a lecturer, and I got that job. I was given that job the week before I actually defended my thesis. So on the Monday when my boss at the time rang me to give me the position, I hadn't even sat my viva. And so I must have done something right. That's all I can say with that one. Yeah. That way.
I don't know, maybe-
Let's see. So interesting. I guess in the US context, that there is also this whole thing of, are you going into academia? Are you going into industry? So let's just kind of just say the elephant in the room when it comes to jobs. So before I started the program, I had kind of envisioned, oh, I'm just going to go to industry. But I started, teaching and kind of getting to learn some of the, internal workings of academia. And it did pique my interest. So I was pretty open to either or. I think for me, my circumstance, so the summer of 2022, well, back up to fall of 2021, sorry. One of the things I did do coming into the program is pursue internships and fellowships. So I had a summer fellowship in 2019 with HREx. That was really helpful in terms of expanding my network. And then I was applying for NIH dissertation award actually in the fall of 2021. Huge lengthy application. And then that same fall, I had heard of NCQA's Healthcare Quality and Equity Fellowship. There was an alum from our program who had actually also done this fellowship. So I connected with him. I said, oh, maybe I'll do it. I don't know. Do I really want to spend how many hours on this application? And so I was like, you know what, let me just do it, throw my hat in the ring to kind of see what happens. So got an interview, then did a panel interview, and then started that fellowship August of 2022. Simultaneously working on a dissertation. I don't recommend that. And then working there full time, it was a lot of work. But one of the things that I think was good about the fellowship, it did provide me an opportunity to, again, expand my network and then also, learn about the organization and essentially run a research project out the gate. I was on 2 projects, one around behavioral health integration, one around health equity measurement in quality performance. And, so my colleagues there, thought I was doing a good job. They asked, do you want to kind of stay on? I thought about it. I was, again, still trying to do my dissertation, defended it in March. So I said, you know what? Yeah, let me apply. Interviewed, did a series of interviews. They gave me an offer, negotiated. And then I said, I'll stay. Like, I liked the work that they were doing. Again, they collaborate with tons of health plans, health systems across the country. So I thought it was a good place for me to kind of land and not have to worry about it. Because really, in terms of if I was going to go into academia, I needed to be ready for the market like this past fall, which I was not, right? I was still working on the bulk of my dissertation. So I think part of it also was just, I think honestly, just right place, right time, right connections for my circumstance.
Just before we move on, just wanted to add, even if you don't know what you want to do specifically, or you've not honed in on a specific idea, don't think it's a loss. Just my advice in that respect would just be develop transferable skills. So I had no intention initially to stay in academia. And I knew that to a part, I could make money and I was developing those teaching skills. I took those opportunities. Equally, I knew I was going to stay. What was going to be, whether it was going to be part-time or full-time. I'd need marketing experience. So I'd actively go and seek these opportunities to the point when I asked the head of department, can I mark the summer exams this year? She was like, are you for real? I was like, yeah, I'm actually asking, can I mark? Because I knew that would be the experience that I needed. Publications as well. It's never too early to try and get published. I'd even finished my PhD, I'd published several articles. That always works in your favor. If you're not ready to publish yet, then at conferences, going to conferences, presenting there, learn so many skills through presenting and having to write up in different formats, so not just the traditional paper presentation, the 15-minute oral one, but poster presentations as well, round tables, etc. These all different skills you can use when you're writing applications. You see there. Whatever job you apply for, there's going to be, at least 10. And that's been, probably playing it down in this economy. So that you have to stand out in some way. And you're not going to stand out if you have to try and fabricate stuff. You're going to do it if you've got something genuine to write about. And so yourself, take as many experiences as you can, even if you don't know what you want to do. So that when you have those transferable skills to write about, even in that direct industry.
Yeah. I had developed a simple formula for my observations about programs I've been in, and it's that the probability of completion is inversely proportional to the length of time you're in the program. And I had this discussion with my son because he was contemplating going into a top 20 MBA program, and it was, full-time, part-time. He was employed. He had a wife and one child. So he'd been working in the field he was going to study finance about 5 years. So it was a really big decision, and I didn't push him in one direction or the other, but I gave him my formula, and he did his own thinking, which was good. And he decided to go full-time, and he never regretted it. He really didn't regret doing that, because I think the formula was going to apply with a family and working full-time and staying in a program too long. So that said, each of us is unique, and so is everybody else.
Could I ask the audience physically sitting here if you all have any questions? Oh, absolutely. Can I first introduce you and please thank you?
Sure,
You
sure.
come up here. This is Daryl, who is part of the speech communications team. Let's thank him and come on up. Allison had, also in the communications team. I just want to thank them and a lot of the other folks, and beyond the walked out. And Lola's run out there. Before we wrap up, they have been instrumental in making sure that we have, photography, this, that, and really just making sure that we're capturing this moment of it.
She's being very humble. I promise I'll be making up. I have two questions. One is a little silly and one is very serious. Questions to the young lady beside Portia is that from Manchester, correctly? So is it United or City? Is my and then my second serious question is that one lesson I always learned from my parents is you never know yourself or know somebody else until you see a problem. And so I wanted to know from you guys what you learned this process. Oh,
Fantastic question, Daryl.
I'm a journalist.
Are you gonna come into my program? There you go.
First one, United by default. It wasn't a choice. My family all read, and I had never had a say in it. But City are performing better now. I do have to say that because I've got several City friends. Yeah, so that's that one. Something that I didn't know, you need a good amount of resilience, I think, when you're doing a PhD. Because as great as you plan it, and I'm a massive planner, and I have excellent time management skills, life comes at you, things happen, world events happen that knock you and test you. And eventually you have to bounce back at some point if you want to complete. And that's sort of in any level, even when you're trying to publish, you'll get feedback, etc. Your supervisor yourself, you think you've produced the best thing ever, and your supervisor will come and red ink all over it. And that takes resilience as well, because you've got to think, oh yeah, or he or she, they're not just, trying to tell me I'm rubbish, they're trying to help you learn. But you have to have the aptitude to be able to take that on board and learn from it, etc., and develop. So yeah, my one would be resilience.
Similarly, I think learning to be the best of the best, and sometimes just doing good is good enough. Yeah.
I guess I learned about humility, and maybe I previously viewed the world as very objective and quantitative, and everything was linear, and it could be reduced down to measurable parts. And then I think that both personally and professionally, over the last number of years studying this, that I'm starting to understand that the importance of human experiences, and that, social creatures, and that, the truth might be a little more difficult to measure numerically than I first believed. So I think, yeah, like academic honesty and humility in that.
I agree constantly. I have no idea how I did that, but it got done. Would I recommend it? No. But one other thing I would add to that is who do world and we think it, it has to be done, to Jenny's point, like to for any seed or whatever. It's like if it's going to happen, it's my cutoff. Fall where they may. And usually when you do that, like I think you have to just trust that you've done. Life just needs to happen, right? You can't control everything.
Duncan is one of my undergraduate students at Public Health Science program at Shady Grove. Would you say?
I'm here because she is trying to recruit me to eventually do a PhD.
PhD material. Can I just tell you? So the audience.
Yeah, sorry. So I am actually a bachelor's candidate. I am way back in my kind of journey, which has been non-linear. And I guess my main question is, knowing what you know now at this stage in your process, I'm wondering what you would say to your pre-PhD program acceptance self about advice for that person, things that they should keep in mind as they move forward into their kind of PhD journey.
I can start real quick. That's what I would say, honestly, because I look back. So I moved from Atlanta to DC to start this program. And when I say I was just like in my bubble, DC's right here. We have cherry blossom. It was strictly just like work. Maybe I'll go out to dinner once in a while. But pretty much just like work consumed me. So I think I'd probably say to myself, like, it's okay to like go out and have fun. Like, it doesn't have to be all about work. It shouldn't be all about work either.
Probably you're meant to be here for the longest part, probably because I was at Cambridge as well, which is a very white elitist institution. I suffered from imposter syndrome, but that's not just me. Like literally, probably everyone who goes there has the same thing. Well, now I've got amazing colleagues, so I don't experience that as much. Yeah.
First of all, wonderful supportive colleagues. Those are the ways that to minimize
I would just have faith in what you're trying to do. It's easy to let yourself be influenced and funneled down the direction other people think you should go. But if you hold on to what you think is right for you and don't let go of it, yeah.
I'll really pick up on what's already been said, which is one, follow your passion and try as hard as you can, even though others are trying to direct you somewhere else, try to find the pathway that's right for you. Pathway meaning concentration, academic concentration, coursework, and so forth. And the other thing is time management. So prepare for that. Just believe, really believe in what you're trying to do and give it your all. You can do it.
Yeah, very similar themes. I'd say you don't need to apologize for your passions and your enthusiasm. You know, you can double down on them and share them and be unapologetic about what really interests you and the difference that you want to make. And then a thing that I learned kind of speaks to yesterday too. I became an adult maybe at 35 when I realized what was required for me to be well. So, you know, sleeping 3 hours a night is not sustainable. Stop thinking you can do more by sleeping less, or like all the basic recipe for your personal wellness. You quit making withdrawals from that bank, make deposits so you can do more work that week than that one individual night. You know, so that's my advice.
Great answers, great responses. Thank you, Duncan. You actually asked one of the questions that I had put in there. See? You're going into a doctorate program. Okay. To wrap this whole thing up here, I've got a few minutes over, but I just want to kind of wrap this session up with this one question. Naturally, you all are here as part of an international exchange. For sure, you're here physically, but still, we are part of this international, international research, health research exchange group. I would love to hear how you all feel that this is you, having an international element as part of your research and career. How has it benefited you in your research, in your professional life, in your lives? If you all just kind of talk about that, the importance of that.
Just quickly. So I did help with building, HREx and connecting. It's just been fulfilling, just getting outside of the US bubble of healthcare. I think you intuitively know that there are similarities because it's the challenge of just broader health systems. But I think for me, it also presents like an opportunity, right? Like I don't have to stay in my research bubble and just stick to the collaborators that I have here. There's room for me to connect with Mark and like work on a paper or connect with Amarpreet or Jenny, right? And so I think it's just opened up the possibilities because oftentimes, if you don't have those connections already, there's not that opportunity, right, for you to actually collaborate, kind of cross nations. So I think for me, it's really just the opportunity to collaborate on research.
Very largely falls into social policy now, and a lot of policy so my PhD itself was very UK centric, but moving forward my research will have to go more European, more international. These connections is great because I'm meeting people that I connect with, and design will require me going abroad to delve deeper into those policy environments, etc. Or just give me a connection of someone that I can. So that's like a great connection that I can build on and stuff, etc. as well.
So Amarpreet here, on the first night they were here, we went to dinner in the hotel, and by chance, one of my former students, who was an attorney when he got my MPH in practice and policy, William Tilburg, he was an attorney. He came and he got his MPH, but now he is the director of the state's medical cannabis division. So it's like this progression, and he is very ingrained in government. And out of nowhere, Amarpreet was there. She's here. She met Will. A lot of actually projects that they would like to work on when it comes to pain management. It's just those types of things that just come out of nowhere when you're meeting folks across the pond.
When you're there networking, networking people.
Yeah, I mean, for me, I was so delighted and excited to be selected to come on this trip. It's just such an amazing opportunity. And as I said, I work for the NHS, and the sort of approach that my organisation is taking to sort of conferences and things is this sort of digital by default attendance, and that has its benefits. It does. I won't deny that. But I really learn. I'm the kind of person that learns through kind of like more hands-on experiences. Any of us are, I think, and just being able to have that sort of immersion, and from the minute you get off the plane right through which the health services operate here, it's so much more kind of hands-on, and I really hope that we will have a kind of to how we do things that, we don't continue, lose all the kind of digital by default. And I'm really hoping, I need to talk to you about whether we can, between the two countries. And I think, it's more constrained. Yeah, delighted to be here. Thank you so much.
I think this demonstrates that we're all people. And while we have cultural and other differences, we can work together. And we can work individually, we can work institutionally, and I think very importantly, interdisciplinary. And I think there's just such a constellation of opportunities that, were just not there before. And they are now. I mean, it's almost overwhelming, really. Lots of opportunities out there.
The Doctoral network has allowed for greater impact on my work, but also for it to be easier in different ways. By being part of networks and having relationships with people overseas, it turns out that my work is most impactful or ready to be adopted in somewhere like Australia, not at home. And if I was limiting myself just to the province that I work in, it probably have very little impact. My system isn't ready for it. We have other priorities, but by being connected to the people, I collaborate with them. Or when I had issues with recruiting people to participate in co-design, what I could do, I could expand it to involve Europeans and Americans. So I could just really increase, amplify the impact, feasibility and the impact of the work. So being a part of the network, I don't know that my work would have been as successful without it.
Thank you very much. I mean, this is really important to emphasize that we are a global community, international and global community, and we learn from each other, right? We're not in this bubble that we always think we are. We have common issues across the pond and, across country. If we work together, our students work together, they meet other students, other researchers, other faculty, generate some engagement strategies, collaborate. This is how you identify solutions or be applicable in multiple things. And that's very, very important. I think it's time that we and again, I just want to thank the student panel here. Thank you so much for being here. The rest of the panel, if you all don't mind standing, Kate, Mark and Tilo. These are the advisors. And again, thank you so much. Thank you for the audience. And we will have a second session at 1 o'clock from 1 to 2:30. Professor Exworthy here is going to talk about health equity in the UK health system challenges. So go off, have lunch, do whatever you. We will start the second webinar at 1 o'clock. Thank you all very much. Thank you.